Death's Door has players controlling a crow, but not just any crow. This crow works as a reaper. Players are introduced to this unnamed character as they arrive for another day working at the Reaping Commission headquarters. When reapers traverse doorways to explore different areas of the world, their mortal clock begins to tick down. With that introduced to the player, your crow faces off with the monster they have been sent to reap, but things don't go as planned. Upon defeating the monster, you are knocked out, and the soul you were sent to reap is stolen by an older crow. After confronting the thieving elderly crow, the player is introduced to the titular Death's Door, and must help the older crow obtain 3 giant souls to help open the aforementioned door. This basic quest sends players on an intriguing story, which involves the company you work for and the potential nefarious activities it has carried out. The concept of death and immortality is a central theme of Death's Door, and within the world, outliving your expiration date slowly corrupts your soul. The story itself is simmering in the background as players vanquish these corrupted beings, the majority of the plot being provided during the final act of the story. Certain characters provide subtle hints to the deeper narrative of play, but the expositional dump provided during the final hours of the game adds much context to the adventure. There is an additional true ending which fans of Acid Nerve will want to experience, as it ties the story together in a mind-shattering way. Players can still enjoy Death's Door without paying much attention to the narrative, but the game is improved due to the story that unfolds. The world itself is also fleshed out with some quirky side characters, like a bard who sings some humorous songs of your adventures, and a bar owner named Jefferson who is quite clearly a giant squid possessing a dead man's body. Even the majority of bosses you encounter are given unique personalities, each showcasing how soul corruption works. Overall, the narrative tells an interesting story with some mature themes, especially regarding whether it's better to die with freedom or live without it, which I really enjoyed. It will take the average player around 10 to 15 hours to finish the main story and access the true ending. The visual style of Death's Door has a similar style to claymation works such as Wallace and Gromit, and if you want a gaming comparison, Little Nightmares. It's a unique art style, and the world outside the commission has varying degrees of detail and vibrancy, which helps make each area distinct. Each area is fairly large, which provides its own positives and negatives, as there is no in-game map to examine when exploring. For the most part, I had no trouble getting from point A to point B within each area, but when it came to navigating each location to reach 100% completion for the true ending, it was frustrating to navigate. As exploration is a major element of Death's Door, I can see some players finding the lack of in-game map more frustrating than it should, and having gone online, I can see this is a divisive topic. One of my favorite visual elements of Death's Door is the lighting. Seeing the shadows cast from the trees above when exploring the overgrown ruins, or the cascading lights from the nearby fire is incredibly beautiful. If exploration is one of the major elements of Death's Door, the other is combat. The combat on offer feels like an improved and expanded version of Titan Souls. This combat system provides players with a basic sword strike, charged attack, dodge, and also magical abilities. Combat is smooth, responsive, and the variety of physical and magical attacks allows players to mix and match their perfect build. Death's Door doesn't allow players to simply spam magic attacks from a distance, as your magic powers are finite and only refill by utilizing physical attacks. Sure, players can strike nearby crates or pots to refill this bar, but for the most part it encourages players to get up close and personal with enemies to make magic skills viable. It's an intelligent system which forces players to engage in enemy combat in a variety of ways. I found the combat system satisfying, and it provided enough challenge to keep battles entertaining, but it never felt overwhelming. I personally think Death's Door isn't incredibly difficult. Even the boss encounters can become quite manageable if players learn attack patterns and engage in combat methodically. For the most part, some sections leading up to boss encounters are actually more difficult than the boss itself. Death's Door is a perfect example of working smarter rather than harder, and it will reward players who bring this mentality to each battle. But don't expect Death's Door to be an easy adventure. You will die a lot as you learn enemy locations and boss patterns. My favorite aspect of Death's Door is the incredible soundtrack, which is consistently brilliant throughout each area you visit and boss encounter you experience. My personal favorite piece of music is the Old Watchtowers. This track appears late in the game, and it helps heighten the narrative and drive the player forward through some of the toughest battles so far. It's utterly brilliant, and I have been obsessed with this track ever since I hit the end credits. Death's Door feels like Acid Nerve improved and expanded on the greatness found in Titan Souls to create a brilliant successor. Death's Door is clearly influenced by games such as The Legend of Zelda and the Souls series, but is able to use these inspirations to help craft a brilliant adventure. The soundtrack is simply phenomenal, and even if you never intend to play Death's Door, I implore you to check out the soundtrack. If you're looking for a charming, indie experience with a brilliant soundtrack, responsive combat, and an intriguing narrative, Death's Door is worth opening and experiencing for yourself. If you want to check out my full written review, check the description below.